Welcome to Clarkston Memories. The program Clarkston Memories is intended to share some of the memories of the Clarkston community in an earlier time. It's supported by the Clarkston Historical Society with pictures and information. And today we're going to visit with Joe and Mel Vara. Joe and Mel came to teach in the Clarkston schools in 1954. And the Clarkston schools had just been reorganized as a community school district in the early 1950s. Before that, the organization was various one-room schoolhouses in the area of Bay Lake, Andersonville, Sashabaw Plains, and schools were all governed by local members in that area. In the early 50s, all the students attended one school called the Clarkston School, located on Walden Road. That's the area where we would now call Renaissance High School today. K-12 students were there, along with the superintendent's office was there. So you had high school and kindergartners all in the same building. In the early 1950s, 3 elementaries were built around the township. Clarkston Elementary, South Sashabaw Elementary, which is no longer there but was located in a field across from North Sashabaw, and the Andersonville Elementary out on Andersonville Road. Later in the 1950s, Pine Knob was added, and later Bay Lake and North Sashabaw Elementaries were built. The need for schools was precipitated by the fathers who returned from World War II and the new subdivisions that were growing around Clarkston. The East Lawn area was populated with new homes, and the orchards with streets like Snow Apple and Cram Lane was built in 1954. And 2 young teachers were hired by the Clarkston schools about this time. And welcome to Joe and Mel Vara, who are longtime excellent educators in the Clarkston schools. Mr. Vara, I think you had 37 years in education, and Mrs. Vara, you taught for over 20 years in the Clarkston schools. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you decided to become a teacher, and then we'll talk about how you got to Clarkston. So we'll start with Mrs. Vara.
Well, I went to Central Michigan University, and I was raised on a farm in Imlay City, the middle of 5 children, and I went to a country school, which was just a little ways from our home, and it was just an exciting place to go to school. And the reasons that I wanted to share, the thing that I wanted to share is that my sister taught me to read before I went to kindergarten. And then I just became enamored with school. It was a one-room schoolhouse, and the teacher was fabulous. Her name was, the school was Donovan School, and her name was Verone Donovan, and she was just a beautiful, beautiful teacher, and she made the classroom magical. And so my reading, it's been my passion all my life, and schools have been just very special places.
Mr. Mel, would you tell us, you came from the Upper Peninsula?
Yes, I was born in Bessemer, Michigan, on a farm, and my mother was working in a store in Ironwood, and she had a streetcar. She would save 10 cents to pay $5 to pay for the doctor when I was born. Later I moved to a project, WPA project in Ironwood called Resettlement. 115 homes built during Franklin Delano Roosevelt time to provide work for children, for adults. I lived there most of my life, graduated from Ironwood High School. I went into teaching because of my experience as a Sunday school teacher, working with youth. I thought it'd be a good career, and it certainly has been.
Thank you. Well, with the school consolidation, and there was a growth in the population, usually a superintendent or a team would go recruiting to the colleges. And can you tell us a little bit how you were hired? I know that Dr. Green hired both of you. Dr. Green was the superintendent of Clarkston. So we'll start with Mrs. Vara, how you met Dr. Green and what you thought, because you'd never been in Clarkston, right?
No, neither one of us had ever heard of Clarkston. It was a brief interview, and I really don't remember very much about it, except that it just sounded good, and I signed up. As simple as that. It was just, providential, I think.
Well, and I know you had a little different story, Mr.
Well, I was going to teach in Escanaba for $2,800. And I don't know why I went to the placement office to visit with this superintendent from Clarkston, but I was so impressed with him. He's well-dressed, spoke so well, and had pictures of the Clarkston area. And in 5 minutes, he offered me a job for $3,200. I said, no, I'm going to Escanaba. A week later, there was a contract mailed to me. How he got my address, I don't know, for $3,500. I signed that contract and came to Clarkston. I had no idea where Clarkston was. Living in the UP, it was a long trip in my '49 Chevrolet. There was no I-75, there was no Mackinac Bridge, there were no telephones, no fast food restaurants, and Dr. Green had arranged me to live with Mrs. Cedarland on Middle Lake Road. And I paid $10 a week, and she provided breakfast and washed my clothes. What a deal. And that was the old Hunlock house. I live there now.
When teachers came to Clarkston, I know you had a similar experience, Mrs. Vara,
Yes.
that they didn't just have to go out and find their, well, you had to find your own place, but it wasn't necessarily, there weren't apartments in Clarkston at the time.
Not at
So
all.
tell us a little bit about yours.
Well, it was Mrs. Odell owned the drugstore in Clarkston, and she had two daughters. One was at college, and the other one was a sophomore. So she had to go to work to open up the store, and wasn't home until 9 or 10 at night. And so my friend Mary and I went there, and it seems to me that Dr. Green helped us to decide. Where we would go, gave us suggestions. But it was just providential again.
So you're living in someone's house, because
Yes.
there really were no
And there were 2 houses separated us. We both lived on Middle Lake Road.
Oh, okay. Well, we have a picture of Cheeseman's Ice Cream shop in 1955, and a picture of Clarkstonelle in 1958. So it kind of tells a little bit about where you were teaching at the time. Now, let's start and talk about, that first year you were teaching, and maybe the class size and what your day would be like.
Okay, huge classes, of course, very few resources. Lunches were in the room with the children. I can't say enough good things about Central Michigan, because I was so well trained and grounded, and they gave me good tools for teaching. But it was the classrooms were, they had those big desks. You could hardly get through the aisles to do those kinds of things. And so it was just there was so much excitement about it. It was just I loved being in there, and I loved the children. The children were just fabulous. I think every class I ever had, they had beautiful children in them.
And you taught first grade?
I started with second,
second.
and then I came back. I was gone for 1 semester and came back. I went to Denver to teach and came back the second semester to do 3rd grade.
And then but primarily most of your career, or early, you were in kindergarten also, right?
Yeah. I taught 1st grade in Denver for 1 semester, and I came back and had 3rd grade, which was wonderful, because a lot of them I had in 2nd grade. So that was wonderful.
So we have a picture of you, I believe, with the students, reading to the students in the classroom.
Yes, that would have been at Clarkston Elementary.
And so what would your day, kindergarten was half day at the time. And what kind, can you take us through a day, what your day might be like, starting with the morning? And
Well, of course, this is the thing with kindergarten. It's changed now, but it was just a grounding, a basic preparation. And so it was just the routine. Children thrive on routine. Kindergarten kids thrive on routine, and so just, you know, doing roll call, and then I always liked to have them in a circle because you could see what was going on. So they'd be in a circle, and we'd do all of our music and drama and finger plays and all those kinds of things. And then they'd come over, and then I would have them come over in a group to give them their instructions in front of me on the floor. And then they'd go back and do their work.
Well, I was counting some of those pictures, and some of those pictures had 32, 34, 37 kids in a room. There was many
children.
Yes, that was
Yeah. The only time I had fewer children was when I did developmental kindergarten.
Well, talk about that a little bit, because that was, I know that you were very passionate about that.
Yes. Well, they were very, the kindergarten teachers, we had to present it to the board. And we had to make a presentation that we knew it was going to be really important for them to approve that. And so that's what, it was just a real good time. I remember Anita Davison was the one that was really helping us with getting outside help from people with developmental kindergarten. And so we went to workshops, and then brought the people back for us to be trained for that. Now, my first developmental kindergarten class was in the morning, and I think there were 7 or 8 boys and 1 girl.
And well, most of that, I know you taught for over 20 years, but most of that time you were at after you left Clarkston Elementary, you were at North Sashaba and then Pine Knob, maybe?
Yes, yes, I was at Pine Knob too. Okay. It was half day at one, and I was half day at Bailey Lake one time, because I was a low person on the totem pole, so I was the one that had to travel to the different schools.
Piece, yeah.
And every one of the experiences were really wonderful, because I just have always just loved Clarkston. I've just always loved the way they've handled their school system.
Mr. Vara, you've taught in several schools, but you also were administrator in several schools. You've had a very varied career. We know you as Mr. Clarkston Schools because you are the best cheerleader that that Clarkston Community Schools has. You've had a long career. You're dedicated to the school district. And talk to us a little bit about the assignments. When you started here, I know you were in the classroom. And
I started teaching 6th grade at Clarkston L, and being the only man in the building, parents wanted me to be their teacher, and Mrs. Purcell, my principal, put her foot down and said, no, 34 is all you're going to have. I remember Mary Powell, who owned Powell Garbage, had a boy named Jerry. She was willing to pay big money to have Jerry in my class. Well, she wouldn't hear of it. So my first day, I had 34 kids, and I got some bucket of chalk, some colored paper, construction paper, and 7, 8 textbooks, and go to it. I taught everything. We had no art teacher, no science coordinator, no math coordinator, no reading coordinator. We did have a music teacher, and she was excellent, Miss Bell. But I thought that's the way life was. I didn't complain about the class size. I didn't complain because I had all these things. One of the things I remember, I used to play outside with the kids at recess, where there were no monitors. So every recess I played with the kids, whether it was soccer or softball. And in the spring of the year, we used to have softball. I played for the girls against the boys, and we equally won the games. And parents even would bring Kool-Aid and cookies
to watch
the games. I just thought that's the way it was. 34 years, I didn't complain. I could never get my hot lunch count or my milk count right, and I got leveled for that. But I still hear from my kids today. I have a girl named Betty Valide, has never forgotten my birthday in 58 years. I got a letter from Sharon Gottschalk the other day, remembering the good old days. And I was in Chicago about 6 years ago, and I went up to the elevator and ran across one of my former 6th grade students. And she says, oh, Mr. Vara, I got to tell you about, I just had great memories And I thought she would talk about reading, writing, arithmetic. She said, no, I remember those softball games. They were just the greatest thing. So I taught 6th grade, and I got interested in coaching. Ed Hintz wanted to know if I wanted to coach varsity track or cross country or basketball, and I said I would. So I went to the junior high, worked for Bob Wilkinson and Kelly Burnett. Coached for a number of years, became a principal at Sashball, and Dot Green put me in charge of the curriculum, designing the building, hiring all the teachers, and Floyd Vincent, who worked here, passed away some time ago, a long time ago. We started Sashball Junior High, and that was a thrill for me. 1,000 kids.
Tell us a little bit about, and this was in the late 60s?
69.
69. So Clarkston was growing, and more subdivisions were here, so we had more students.
I-75 was going in,
Okay.
and that brought a lot of students. And we received a lot of students from Pontiac because of the busing situation there. We were growing in leaps and bounds. We didn't think we'd be able to fill Sashaba, but there's 1,000 students. And that was the year teachers went on strike in 1969. Sashaba was not completed. Lacked desks, electricity, lockers, but we managed well. And after 3 weeks, the school was on strike, and in the 3 weeks that they were on strike, they finished the building and ready to move in again with the kids.
Some things have a golden lining to them.
It was.
Silver lining.
And I love the Sashaba spirit. Those teachers I had dedicated their lives and spent hours and hours, and I just love every one of them. And in 2003, the Board of Education, Dr. Al Roberts, dedicated the Sashaba Gymnasium in Melvara. And then all the teachers were invited to the board meeting, and only one teacher from 1969 didn't show up.
But we have a little picture of that in a minute. I know that some interesting things. We have the picture from the 1964 Clarkston Junior High yearbook, which was dedicated to you by the students, which is a great honor when the students choose who they dedicate. And then we also have a picture from 1966 when you were administrative assistant and counselor at Clarkston Junior High. I think that was just before you went over to, before the building of Sashaba. You share a little information about Dr. Leslie Green, who was the superintendent of the time, and what you knew him probably best of anyone.
I have a lot of admiration for Dr. Green. You mentioned all these schools that were built. He bought all the property for those schools, built the schools. Only 2 schools in the district he didn't have much to do with. That was Independence Elementary and Clarkston High School. He built them all. School was growing in leaps and bounds. It was always a pleasure to work with. I learned a lot from him because he let you alone and you ran your building. He was a wonderful man. He worked for Clarkston Schools for almost 25 years as superintendent, which is unheard of today. I just love the man. I owe my career to Dr. Green. I remember I was the JV varsity basketball coach, had an undefeated season. They hired another coach instead of hiring me, and I was crushed. Dr. Green called me over and said, you know, Mel, you have several children, and I would like to be administrator, so I'll make you administrative assistant. And remember, every 25th day of every month, when you get your retirement check, you think of Doc Green. Because going into higher administration, my salary was more and my retirement's more. And every time that 25th shows up, I think of old Doc Green. And he made a tremendous mark on this community, and a lot of people don't know him or don't remember him. I was responsible for having a plaque built at the old board office, in memory of Dr. Green, and I just don't think people realize what a man he was.
He was very financially conservative.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I know that, I know you talked a little bit about Sashabaw. It was Sashabaw Junior High at the time, not Sashabaw Middle School, because that was the configuration of the schools.
6 through 9.
Oh, 6 through 9, okay. So that was, it was really to alleviate, well, student population in the elementaries as well as in the whole school district.
Yes.
So what did you handled the construction for the school district? I mean, not that you.
Well, he put me in charge of working with the architect, and I had teachers help design the building. And after that was done, he put me in charge of hiring the teachers, the staff, and just getting ready for school. I had 2 great secretaries, Phyllis Mansfield and Marianne Radoy, who worked like dogs in preparing in the summer. They were just outstanding.
Well, I know that from there you moved on to the administration office. I'm not sure how long you were at Sashabaw.
I was at Sashabaw for 2 years, and then the 3rd year, Dr. Creed made me principal of both junior highs.
You've had a lot of those assignments that no one else has had. I mean, that's a huge. You're what, 6 miles away from each other? The 2 junior highs, and you're 6 miles away.
I'll never forget the time when he appointed me to be a curriculum director, and I wasn't really trained to be one. And I asked him, "What does a curriculum director do?" He said, "That's why I hired you." But George Berry was assistant superintendent the very first day as in the central office. He said, "You're in charge of K through 6, hiring, evaluating programs." And the next day, Milford Mason came in. He said, "You're in charge of 7 through 12, child accounting, the Voc School, vocational education building." I was just gasping for air. But you know, I weathered through it, and I made some curriculum changes that I'm very proud of. But those were great times. I had a lot of responsibility, a lot of power, and I never had trouble going to work every day. I loved every day of it.
Well, I know that, you know, the unfortunate death of John Kirchgessner in, I'm not sure the year, the early 90s, I guess 91?
I think it was 88.
88.
Somewhere around.
They asked you to go to the high school.
Yes.
Mr. Kirchgessner had lost his life in an airplane crash.
Right.
And so the high school students were extremely upset, and they asked you to go there as the interim principal, as well as keep your job at central office.
Right.
And do you want to talk about being the high school principal?
That was a tragic day. It was on Friday, and Jan Kirchgessner called me up. His wife, John, had a plane accident, and they had a dance that night at the high school. Would I please chaperone it? And so I would gladly do it. We didn't know what his condition was, but as the evening progressed, we found out it was pretty bad. And the kids found out. What bothered me was the press already knew about it by 8, 9 o'clock at night, wanted my opinion. I really didn't give any opinion, nothing. And the dance ended quite early, and my wife and I and Rosemary Lewis and Dwayne Lewis went to be with Jan in the hospital. She had me go visit John, and by the way, John was a breath of fresh air in the high school. The kids loved him, we all loved him. He just put that school another notch, and he loved his job. There was John sitting on his gurney, and we stayed with Jan all night, and in the morning we left, and then the family got together to decide what to do with him, and there wasn't much they could do, and John passed away. And then Monday morning, we always had meetings with Mr. Mason and other administrators, and he appointed me the
interim
principal of the high school. And I tell you, that was a tough job because those kids loved John, the teachers loved, and here comes this guy from the board office. It was a very difficult role for me. It took a little spunk out of me, it took a little juice out of me. I had a little tough time during the high school graduation event, and the kids were a little bit rowdy, and Bill Pudvin, who was sitting down below, looked at me and says, "Mel, get a hold of yourself." And I did, and the graduation went fine. But after that graduation, I sent a letter to every kid that graduated, and I think there's 5 or 6 of them are doctors today,
Yes, we have a picture of some of them.
and they work at the ambulatory, which is
Clarkston Medical. Clarkston Medical.
Yeah, some bright kids, and
Dr. Moskovic, Dr. Wendy McFalda.
and Dr. O'Neill's boy.
Yeah.
So it was a tough experience, but I did the best I could, and I think the faculty, one thing I loved about the faculty, they kept plodding along and doing their job.
Well, that's what educators do. Educators are the parents, quasi-parents during the day for those students, and or leaders, mentors, whatever. But we have a couple of pictures of some of the leaders of that class of 1992. I understand that was the year you retired also?
Yes.
And then we have a colored picture of your colleagues and friends who came to Sashabaw Junior High when the school gym was named in your honor. Mm-hmm. And so when anyone walks into Sashabaw Middle School, as it's known today, goes inside the gym, you need to think of Mel Vara, who was part of the team that built that school and built the Clarkston schools. Now, I have one last thing, a story that I want to share. I know that everybody wonders, here is a young lady from the FUM who comes to Clarkston, and a young man with a 49 Chevrolet from the UP. How did you get together?
Well, Mel was dating all the different girls, and he called me, and I didn't want to go out with him because I thought he was too cocky. And so I had a daughter in my classroom, and her mother taught next door to Mel. And she said, "Joe, he's really a nice guy." And I said, "Yes, I know he is, but he's just too sure of himself." I have to laugh
So
when
how
I
did
think
you
about
wait-
it.
how
So
did you-
anyway, I was coming home from church on Sunday morning, and he was in 2 houses apart, and he was coming home with his new car. That's what Mel says. It was the car that did it. But anyway, he said, "Won't you go for a ride with me?" Well, we ended up going to Michigan State for the day, met all of his friends that were still in college, and we went out for dinner, and we went out to a movie, and we just had a really good time. But the thing that impressed me so much about him was how highly he spoke about his mother and dad and his 3 brothers. And I just thought, I was really touched by that. And that's when we started dating.
And how many years later marriage was?
58 years.
58
we just had
years.
a 58th anniversary.
Well, we thank you very much for sharing your lives with the kids from Clarkston, from high school to kindergarten or kindergarten to high school, and sharing with us today some of those memories, and our best wishes to you, and thank you. If you have any suggestions for more Clarkston Memories, please email them to jkhorses@gmail.com, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we feel very honored.